The Chaser Report is recorded on Gadigal land.
Striving for mediocrity in a world of excellence. This is the Chaser Report.
Hello and welcome to the Chaser Report with Dom and Charles. And Dom, you're looking very glum.
Bet.
What?
I'm trying to double or nothing on you, Charles.
What?
I'm trying to talk about pokey reform today.
Oh, right.
And I was trying to introduce that with the concept that you were a human pokey, because I've just been thinking about pokies for the past few hours, and once you do that, everyone looks like, I don't know, the King of the Nile in your case, or some other poker machine. The sort that I occasionally used to play back in my misspent youth when I was very bored at a pub. But in the state of Victoria, it sounds as though Dan Andrews is actually going to try and do something about the scourge of the one-armed bandit. New South Wales is sweeping the problem under the carpet. For more, stick with us. So, Charles, my daughter's learning to read at the moment. I'm very proud of her. She's doing really well. And she said to me the other day, Dada, what's a VIP?
A VIP.
And she said, yeah, it says on the side of that building, VIP. And I was going, oh, God, where do I start with this one? Well, and if you're not from New South Wales, you probably won't know this either. What happened in New South Wales was that when every fucking pub got a pokey lounge in it and they simply went open, slather on, people betting their savings away in the same place where they take, where they drink, reducing their inhibitions and their ATMs.
Yes.
The way to solve that would be to not have them say gaming lounge or pokies or anything.
Or casino. I think it wasn't casino.
Cardcino.
Cardcino, yes.
That's right. There was too. They wanted a euphemism. So instead they had things like VIP lounge is the most common.
Right. And that was a rule, wasn't it? You're not allowed
to call it what it is.
Because that would trigger, because gamblers, the thinking obviously was that gamblers would walk past a gaming lounge that was called VIP lounge and just think, well, I don't want to go there.
Well, also, I've ruined my life. I'm a shell of a human. I'm not a VIP. There's no way I'm welcome in that lounge. And then, of course, they all display. These days, they're these amazing expensive signs. I walked past them on the way down here today near our office, and they've got these very expensive animations and like coins swiveling around, like full-on kind of 3D rendered graphics. And he's going, how much fucking money are these places making that this tiny pub can have this giant, basically, stadium sign out the front with like dragons swirling around and so on. So they won't be allowed to have gold coins or dragons or any of that shit.
But I actually know a bit of the sort of marketing science behind this, Dom, which is that by far the best customers of gaming lounges are ones that spend all their money.
Yeah, of course.
Right? Like literally their entire fortune and they go completely broke, right?
Well, of course they're the best customers.
But the whole thing is those sorts of people are actually problem gamblers. Like they're an actual type of person.
They're a category.
Yeah, and the one thing that problem gamblers can't deal with very well is seeing triggers. Like I once heard this amazing interview with this problem gambler who said, I can totally resist not gambling until I see a sign and then I just can't go past it. And he said, it was an ABC radio interview, and he said, so on my way here, I had to plot out my route to make sure I didn't walk past any pokey lounges.
That's extraordinary. Okay, well, perhaps I'm wrong, because my thought was that by changing the name, that wouldn't do anything at all, because everyone still knew what it was. You're baffling 5-year-olds. My daughter, not only do I have to explain to her, it's an initialisation, it's not a VIP, it's a VIP, it's a very important person, except it's not that, it's a place where sad people go to blow their wages. That's quite hard to explain to a 5-year-old.
And happy people go to win their wages.
Sure. Yeah, I remember.
I mean, this is the whole thing. It's a very one-sided debate, Dom, because everyone covers the losers, but what about all the people who go in there and then walk out with a small fortune?
Well, Charles, I remember the first time I ever played a dollar machine. There were machines that have a $1 minimum, and that was when I was a bit pissed and had, I don't know, $50 or something that I really shouldn't have put into a pokey. And there was a character on this pokey called W. Winbigs, and he had like bags of money. And you're kind of going, hang on, he's doing well out of this. No, I'm not. My $50, I think, went in about 10 minutes or perhaps less.
None of the sort of dreary coverage that you see on the ABC or in the Fairfax papers ever does a profile on, what was his name?
W. Winbigs.
Mr. Winbigs.
Well, don't they pay, I think it's somewhere between 83% and 87% of what's put in. So a lot of people do make money out of the pokies, except for the next time when they think it's an easy way to make money and then they go back. So anyway, so this is the thing. So Chris Minns in New South Wales has decided that even that is not far enough. It's not going far enough to have all these pokey lounges on every fucking corner of every suburb.
Yes.
Being called VIP lounge or prosperity salon or whatever the other things are that they're called. There's going to be no signage. No signage whatsoever.
So it's like tobacco.
Well, but isn't every second convenience store now called a tobacco station?
Yes,
in Sydney?
but that's because there's a loophole where
course
you
there's a
can
loophole.
use the word tobacco.
Well, I'm fascinated to know what the loophole is going to be that the pokey lounges use because they're all about the loopholes.
They'll now go to being called something like Mr. Winbiggs's residence.
Yeah, that's right. And there's a whole thing where, remember that with the smoking rules where you couldn't smoke in an indoor area?
Yes.
So they put a little sliver of open air so that every pokey lounge was al fresco.
There is not a law that the Australian Hotels Association has not seen and worked out. They're the sort of PwC of legislation.
Except for the accountability. So anyway, so Chris Minns is bringing this change in. And from what you're saying, this problem gambler you heard interview might benefit because if somehow this person can forget that every single pub in New South Wales has pokies in them, except for one or two, and the ones that don't advertise it because it's such a novelty. Like the East Sydney Hotel, Russell Crowe's local, doesn't have pokies in it, but there's a sign saying like no pokies.
Do you think there's a risk that problem gamblers will see the word pokies when it says no pokies and go in
and
there?
trash the joint? Yeah. So, well, if they can forget that anywhere that's a pub has pokies, then they'll probably do well. But what this makes me think, though, is that Chris Minns is completely sweeping the issue under the carpet because the rest of us will go past pubs. We'll forget that pokies are there. We'll forget that problem gamblers are a thing. Yeah. The problem gamblers will just be able to sneak in the back. It will be there'll be no signage. There'll be no shame, right? So they'll just sort of sneak in. Because Chris Minns, let's not forget, he was the candidate that did not want pokey reform. Dominic Perrottet, the Liberal Premier, promised to bring in the cashless gaming card if re-elected mandatory. Didn't win. And Chris Minns' model was a trial of 500 pokies.
Yes, which was very funny. Like in terms of all the policies that could possibly ever work, this one was instantly the world's shittest idea, wasn't it? Because they said what we'll do is we'll do a trial of 500 pokies that don't work as well or something. No, that are cashless, right?
Cashless gaming cards, yeah.
And it was like, okay, so why won't people go to the machine next to the one that's the cashless one? And
which venue is going to agree to be the pilot for this harder to gamble on pokies? Well, I know a venue that could, Charles.
Oh, yeah.
The Randwick Labour Club. It's now called the Randwick Club. They've dropped Labour from the name. I think Randwick's too posh now. But Labour and certainly Labour associated registered clubs actually exist. So Labor kind of has skin in this game.
Yes.
They may still operate pokies in the ACT.
You have to realise, like, in all the commentary about, because the Fairfax papers have been going on all day about, well, you know, will Minns have to cave to this? Because there's a whole lot of problems with only one state doing it and the next state not doing it. First one being, so if you're a money launderer, having easy access to tons of gaming machines is a really good thing.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's very efficient.
Like, it's been boom time for money launderers in the last 20 years.
It's been absolutely extraordinary. It's a brilliant way to do it, and you're very happy to pay. Like, if you get these people would be gambling enough to actually get to see if the 86% thing or whatever it is true.
Yes.
And they're happy to pay. That's cheap to pay 14% laundering fee.
So there's concerns that those money launderers will flock across the borders.
No, it's going to be a bonanza for New South Wales when this happens. So
there's a problem there. But so there's all this sort of thing of will Minns now cave and have to do actually something about it? But there's an assumption there that Minns wants to do something about it.
Sure, which there's no evidence of.
There's no evidence at all.
The whole trial of the 500 machines. That's obviously going to fucking work. Having a card that is linked to, like, you don't need to do a trial sometimes.
Yeah.
A card that is linked to your actual ID that tracks what you put through pokies is going to stop money laundering. You don't need to try to test it out.
Yes.
What's the point of the test?
Well, as I said at the time, I wonder whether we need a murder law trial.
Oh, yes.
Before we implement a law against murder.
Cashless murder.
Yeah, because the thing is, like, how do we know that that outlawing murder works, right?
That's so true.
And
So true.
we should have like half the state where murder's outlawed, half the state where it's not outlawed, and see what happens.
But also, Charles, I can tell you without having to do a trial that if you had a law that in order to use a knife or a gun to murder somebody, you had to log in to the knife or the gun, it would have less murders. Or at least you'd use other means. I'd drop a safe on your head or something.
The Chaser Report. Now with extra whispers.
It's just not that complicated.
These are the sort of complications, Dom, that we're going to learn about during the cashless card trial.
Well, you could do that. Or you could have more guts, like Victorian Premier Dan Andrews. Now, admittedly, there's not nearly as many pokies in Victoria anyway. They've been more conservative to begin with. But they have put through a bunch of
And
changes.
presumably this somehow advantages Crown Casino, these changes.
We'll get to that. You've already seen the loophole. Okay, so what's happening in Victoria, and this is admirable, let's be really clear. Mandatory closing hours, slower spin times, i.e. it takes longer to lose all your money, smaller spending limits. There's also going to be load up limits, so you can't put in more than $100 at a time, so you've got to keep refilling it, so it's boring.
Yeah, that's
And the laundry takes more time. It's like slower to launder.
Yeah.
And you have carded play, so you've got to have the registered thing. But also there's going to be mandatory closures between 4 a.m. and 10 a.m. You can't. I mean, admittedly, who the fuck is gambling at that time other than money launderers and problem gamblers? But so between 4 and 10 you won't be able to. It's outrageous.
Yeah.
There's no pokies at 6:30 a.m. in the whole of Victoria except at Crown Casino. Crown Casino.
And how much does Crown Casino give to Dan Andrews each year in political donations?
How dare you suggest that Dan Andrews is determined to do something.
But
Well, this is the thing.
before you go on, I do want to put the counterfactual to you and just sort of go, look, I think Dan Andrews has gone too far. Because sure, okay, you're gonna strip away the organised crime money launderers, which is a huge problem, especially in Victoria.
It's going to be very inconvenient for the small businesses that run.
But what about
money laundering?
What about the mum and dad money launderers?
Oh.
See, no one ever thinks of the mum and dad money launderers.
Look, just these honest Australians trying to put their kids through a private school.
Just trying to launder, enough to make ends meet.
Yeah.
To do an Aldi run.
It's very expensive, the cost of living these days. And
Yes.
it's not like the government's helped. They've already put one foot in their throat. You know that giant sting where they hacked into all those anom messages and surveilled all the criminals doing the money laundering. I mean, they were already invading their privacy.
Yes.
Just because they thought they were part of organised crime, which they absolutely were. The government thought they could read their messages. And they put in this fake app to do so.
But there is another sort of corollary from this whole thing, which I think is a little bit worrying and where we should sort of pause for thought before we ban gambling.
Sure.
Which is, in some ways, isn't the point about Dan Andrews that he's got no opposition?
That's right.
Not only has the Victorian Liberal Party just gone off into a sort of crazy far-right Christian
Yes, no, they basically don't. So he's actually allowed to do policy that he wants to do, presumably.
But also, I think the Greens have also imploded down there over trans issues. Right.
Wow.
So Dan Andrews is sort of essentially premier for life. And does this not give a bad signal to democracy?
Yes.
That he starts implementing good laws.
He should be having more fun.
Because-
where are the
yes.
bunga parties in
Yes.
Victoria? I mean, where are the extremely dubious moral code breaches by Dan Andrews? Maybe they're coming soon.
Because this is the thin end of the wedge. If suddenly he starts making all these decisions which actually help people, even though he's not being democratically held accountable at all.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, it's a bad model.
Then we will suddenly go, oh, well, that's how, let's dismantle democracy because the Dan Andrews dictatorship model is a better model.
Well, I mean, maybe if Chris Minns, I don't know that if Chris Minns had no opposition, he would actually ban gambling. I'm far to be convinced on that point. But you got to bear in mind also in WA.
Well, he'd have to run a trial on it.
He'd have to run a trial. Yeah, run a trial on just democracy itself. I think.
Yeah.
But in WA, as is established by a very ironic, heavy-handed sarcasm chaser piece once when Craig went to visit WA, the land without pokies. WA doesn't even have these fucking things. Like they don't have pokies in Western Australia except in casinos. The gambling in WA is done with mining. It's a much more high-stakes game. But if you win, you really win big. I think W Win Big was basically modelled on Lang Hancock. It looked a lot like him.
I always thought from my trips to Perth was the reason why they didn't have any VIP lounges over there was because nobody is a VIP. They're all bogans.
That's probably fair. They could have called it a bogan lounge.
Bogan lounge. Yes.
Lovely. So that's what's going on in New South Wales. And he has done one change. This is actually one substantial change, other than the signage. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Chris Minns, he's vowed, this is from The Guardian, he's vowed to reduce the number of pokies in the states. There's no actual policy, just a general intention.
Just a vow.
Doesn't want political donations from clubs with gaming operations. And this is actually interesting. Do you know what the limit is? So in Victoria, they've reduced it from $1,000 you can put in the pokie at once to $100.
Oh, yeah.
You know what the limit is as of 1 July in New South Wales? The maximum you can
What's it
going to
be?
So it's now $500. You can put $500
You can put $500 in.
Into a pokie as of 1 July.
Right.
Before that, it was $5,000 in one go. You could launder $5,000, do one spin, and then take it out again in fresh notes. That's how easy it was to launder money. Actually, why didn't we get in on that?
Well, this is what I'm saying.
Why didn't we get in on
the
that
mum
before?
and dad money launderers.
We could have been those mums and dads.
Yes.
God, it's a lot easier than heavy-handed sarcasm and satire about the government every single day. Oh, we could have been W Win Big.
You know what? I'm going to go to that VIP lounge down the road and...
While you still can.
Yeah.
Get on it. There's amazing spinning coins outside. That pretty much guarantees you'll win. The fact that they've been able to put in a $100,000 sign out the front of the place. You're bound to win, Charles. Go. Why don't you put all the company money in it as well?
What company money?
That's a good point. Our gear is from Road, but part of the Iconoclast Network. Why don't you listen to another episode? Double or Nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
You can't
again.
lose.